From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Monday, May the 12th, 2025. Well, we opened with some truly good news today. That 21-year-old American-Israeli Staff Sergeant Idan Alexander was freed today and reunited with his family after 584 days in Hamas captivity in Gaza. Idan, who is from Tenafly, New Jersey, was serving as a lone soldier in the IDF when he was abducted by Hamas terrorists during the October 7th Hamas massacre. The release was a U.S.-led effort, and President Trump made the announcement today saying Idan is coming home to his family, and that his release was a step taken in good faith towards the U.S. and efforts of the mediators, Qatar and Egypt, to put an end to, he said, this very brutal war and return all living hostages and remains to their loved ones. Idan's mother, Yael, flew to Israel with U.S. hostage envoy Adam Bowler late last night. Her husband and other family members following soon after today. Idan was handed over by Hamas to the Red Cross, who then drove him to a meeting point with the IDF, who transported him to the Re'im military base in Israel. Hundreds waiting on the side of the road to welcome Idan home, and ultimately into the arms of his mother, his father, and the rest of his family at the IDF base. Hundreds also waited and watched the news of Idan's release from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv and in Idan's hometown of Tenafly, watching, waving flags, and singing songs of hope and brotherhood. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed Idan's release and said the government of Israel is committed to the return of all of the hostages and missing, living, and deceased. We will continue to act relentlessly until all of them have returned home to Israel. And this morning, ahead of Idan's release, the Prime Minister's office said the expected release of IDF soldier Idan Alexander without anything in return will be possible due to the vigorous policy that we have led with the backing of President Trump and thanks to the military pressure of IDF soldiers in the Gaza Strip, and said Israel has not committed to a ceasefire of any kind, but only to a safe corridor that will allow for the release of Idan. The Prime Minister saying Hamas has been presented with a deal that would enable the release of our hostages, referring there to the framework presented months ago by U.S. Presidential Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, which Israel has long accepted. Netanyahu met with Witkoff in Israel today and with U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee to speak, he said, about the latest effort to implement the framework for the release of the hostages presented by Witkoff before the expansion of the fighting, and said to this end, Prime Minister Netanyahu directed that a negotiations team leave for Doha, Qatar, tomorrow. Israel's President Isaac Herzog stressed the return of the hostages during a historic visit today to Berlin, marking, he noted, 60 years of diplomatic relations between Israel and Germany and 80 years since the Allied victory over the Nazis. Herzog met with German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, saying Israel and Germany share a joint commitment to human dignity, freedom, and the fight against terrorism and anti-Semitism. Together, we defend the values of the free world and insist on the immediate return of the hostages held in Gaza. 58 hostages now remain held captive in Gaza for 584 days. And yesterday, the remains of an IDF soldier missing for decades was recovered and returned to Israel. The body of Sergeant First Class Tzvika Feldman was recovered and returned to Israel in a special operation led by the IDF and Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, yesterday in Syria, 43 years after he went missing during the First Lebanon War in the Battle of Sultan Yaqub in 1982. Feldman finally back in Israel. IDF troops reciting the Jewish prayer of the dead, the Kaddish, upon receiving his remains. Hundreds gathered in the military cemetery of the city of Hulon to pay their last respects to Feldman as he was finally laid to rest. Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Monday, May the 12th at 7 o'clock. FIDF CEO Steve Weil speaks to Mordechai Kedar. Abigail Pogrebin sits with Elliott Abrams about strengthening Jewish identity at 8 o'clock. At 8:30, filmmaker Ilana Trachtman talks about her documentary, Ain't No Back to a Merry-Go-Round, about a small chapter in the civil rights movement. At 9 on L'chaim, David Goodman speaks about his younger brother Andrew, murdered together with Michael Schwerner and James Chaney by the Ku Klux Klan in Mississippi in 1964. At 10, David Harris speaks with Izabella Tabarovsky on Soviet influence on contemporary anti-Semitism. At 10:30, an encore of the news, and coming up next, it's Good Week, Israel. And that's the JBS News Update for Monday, May the 12th, 2025. I'm Teisha Bader. Am Yisrael Chai.